morning. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk to y'all about this important subject. As you can see, security is a major and pervasive problem. It comes in many levels, in many shapes, and many forms. And people are attacking them on all these levels. I endorse practically everything that was said by Steve and Dan. But I'd like to come from a slightly lower level perspective. I spent most of my career, 13 years at IBM, 20-some with Hewlett Packard, designing computer architectures, and get seriously interested in the security problems in the early 90s. And anyone who tracks the CERT vulnerabilities each week that are published realizes how serious this problem is. The economic estimates of the harm that cybercrime is doing us today are astonishing. Foreign governments, foreign national governments who are actors in this process have great advantages right now because the systems we're working with are so insecure, and they're insecure not only at the operational level but from the foundational level. In a number of the talks that we've given on behalf of Secure 64, which is a startup company located here in Fort Collins and Denver, which I helped start after I retired from Hewlett Packard in 2002. We characterize the current situation as trying to solve the problem with band-aids and bodyguards, but in all cases fighting symptoms. The bodyguards, of course, are firewalls, intrusion detection systems, other things that you have to surround yourself with. The band-aids are patches, and continuous patch Tuesdays have been running now for going on 20 years and still going strong, still serious things popping up. So one of the things we did when I had the opportunity to lead the architecture development at HP Labs called PA Group, which became the basis for the Itanium architecture as a partnership between Hewlett Packard and Intel, was to look at what was happening in the structure of systems with respect to their architecture for security, and what things might be done to put in a processor architecture more of the things that were needed. Despite the dismal profile, and it really is, if you stop and realize that most of the standard systems people are using today work on machines at two different privilege levels, where at the lowest privilege level there's a bloat of code that can do practically anything, and there's little protection among the elements and data and stacks and other operational components for the software, to the point that anybody can trample anything anywhere. Code can be introduced into disks. It can be done by injection of malware where things are running. Get somebody to misbehave and do a buffer overflow attack, or misbehave and inject code that then becomes resident as malware permanently in your system. It's all open to those things. So we looked at the problem of what could we do architecturally to provide the basis for building something that really was secure by design, and one could validate not by testing it completely, but by having basic principles that are well understood that you can demonstrate you're actually realizing in the practice. And that's what we tried to do in the company called Secure 64, which I helped found after retiring from HP. What we've done is to build a secure platform. We do not leverage any existing operating system. Their structure is all flawed. My current opinion is that they're never going to be secure. The architecture that most people are using today, x86s and the RISC architectures, do not have the structure, do not have the machine capabilities that are required. There's at least one instance I can point to of a major success in this area. A man named John Mallory at MIT in Lisp wrote a program that ran the distribution and mailing list systems for whitehouse.gov, and was essentially a web server. Was never compromised. And in building this system, he adopted several basic principles. When input streams came that were to be met by the web server, he parsed them, but then reconstituted them in something that was known to be syntactically correct before he would forward it to the actual handling of the data and retrieval of the dynamic data to be returned to the web page. Secondly, all the content on it was cryptographically protected. And just with having no more help in the architecture other than garbage collection, strong type identification, and the inability to counterfeit pointers, In all the years it was there, it was never successfully attacked. Side by side was an Unix system running in the White House. It was attacked frequently. And John wants to tell the war stories about when the NSA came into audit what had happened and found that nothing had been touched in his system. And the other system had been massively compromised. So we basically designed the system from scratch. To give you an idea of its size, our total image for products that we sell today, including the system and the applications, are probably less than 20 megabytes. So the point about simplicity is right on. You have to have things simplified. While still at Hewlett-Packard, I proposed a set of principles, one of which was you shouldn't run anything at the highest privilege level in a machine where there's no hardware protection that you don't have to. It ought to be limited strictly to mechanisms, nothing but mechanisms. And you ought to be able to control, and we understand how to do this, we filed some patents that cover this. You ought to be able to control that only certain things in the system are allowed to make calls to those particular services. And this is all doable with the right kind of architecture. So we built this system, and what we decided to do was form a company, focus on systems that can improve the security of the cyber infrastructure of the country. In meeting with many different groups of agencies of the government, SRI, Peter Neumann's an old friend, and we worked a lot on these things. Howard Schrobe, who actually stepped to the board in one of these meetings, one of the early cybersecurity meetings where the government was trying to decide was there a serious problem here that we want to pay attention to, and said that the DNS system is where we got to start. And we all agreed with that, and that's where we focus, and that's where our first products are running. So what we've done is to build a line of these DNS systems. We showed this to the Department of Homeland Security when they saw what our platform could do. They actually funded us and helped us develop it. Since we've developed it, they've taken it to red teams at Sandia Labs. We've tried to wring it out for many months. We're not allowed to see the report they wrote because that's classified. But what we do know is after this, it was recommended to the military as an acceptable thing, product for them to buy. So at least we trust they didn't find anything too bad. At any rate, as you can see on this slide, this year there was Intel and HP had an award contest which was decided by a number of independent universities and agencies, CERN included, University of Heidelberg and others, and we were awarded the Mission Critical Innovation Award. And to do this, we're running on the Itanium architecture, which in my opinion is today the only architecture that has the fine-grained memory protection, that has the ability to isolate the critical control state so you can rule out buffer overflow attacks. Basically, Itanium has a very rich register set. There's 128 registers general purpose, and there's also 128 floating point registers. The hardware takes upon itself the renaming and the job of saving and restoring it. And this contains all the critical and control state. It can be stored at a completely different level of privilege to which no one has addressability at all. The code and the data can be totally isolated from each other. It's not even possible to read the code, much less modify it or make any changes to it. And there's a principle I'm going to talk to you about as a chain of trust that we realize is an important theoretical thing. But we took the simplest possible approach. The system has no functionality in it whatsoever to dynamically load anything that's executable while the system is running. Bill Lear of Learjet fame had a principle, which is the only system that won't fail is one you don't have. And we figured if we had to control that only the right things got loaded into memory, there'd be some holes in it somewhere, and so we just don't have it. So the system, the code is encrypted uniquely for each machine using a TPM, the Trusted Platform Module from the Trusted Computing Group, to cryptographically be able to authenticate it, make sure it's not been compromised, decrypt it, and then load it. And then once loaded, the code is loaded down. It's not readable by any other code. The code itself is not readable by any other code. And nothing else can come in while it's running. That's why we claim we're immune to malware. At any rate, I want to talk about the most basic principle that results from this for design, again, coming from this lower level. But I also want to talk about one of the things that has happened as a result of the extensions that have recently gone into the DNS system, resulting in what's called DNSSEC additions. What this means is that anything returned to you from DNS will be accompanied by a cryptographic digital signature, so you can validate that it's really the correct answer. And with DNS, we have the only worldwide highly reliable and available database. There's literally hundreds of root servers today. When Anonymous said they were going to shut down the internet, they're crazy. They really couldn't have done it, because there's a limited number of different IP addresses, but those IP addresses are shared by hundreds of different systems. It's highly redundant. But once you have a worldwide database that's highly redundant and reliable and available, and furthermore, its contents when delivered to you are cryptographically protected with digital signatures, then it's very interesting to ask, what else could you put in that might be useful and helpful? And it turns out there's answers to that. These are some of the folks we're working with right now who are using our system. You can see we've got a number of customers in telecommunications and government and top-level operators. We're partners with just about all the important players in the internet business, and you'll see a number of government accounts there. Actually, our systems are used by affiliates to sign .net.org when the first thing started to get signed by DNS. This is just to show you that this works. We had a number of customers. One of the other decisions we made was that we wouldn't require bodyguard systems to surround this. So we built all the prevention and detection of denial of service attacks into the system. We built all of the other defenses against anything that would be thrown at us in the network. Now, I don't want to leave the impression we think the system is totally secure. I don't think it's possible to build anything that's totally secure. And we know that somebody can get their hands on the hardware and start doing attacks. There are ways they can find out what's going on and probably influence it. But with respect to it being attackable and compromisable over the network, of that we're quite confident. So how did we do this? I kind of sketched it, but let me spend just a moment more on it. Chains of trust, I claim, are sine qua non for security. If you don't have it, you don't have security. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. There's lots of other things you have to do in security. You've got to organize the data once it's resident inside the machine so the data is strongly protected from each other. You've got to guarantee that the system services can only be called by those programs that should be allowed to call them. We started, as I said, by not permitting any dynamic download. And of course, this is a weakness in the system because it's not sufficiently general to do a lot of the things that you want to do. So in working in another Homeland Security effort that where Peter Neumann and I were collaborating again, one of the hard problems is how do you build trustworthy systems? And what we realized is that what we've done in not allowing anything to be objected is really just a special case of having a chain of trust for anything that gets loaded that's executable. And this is the first of my two examples of what I call significant chains of trust. As I said, they're not sufficient, but they certainly are necessary. Anything that's going to execute in the machine, code, scripts, have to live, be created, generated, cryptographically protected, shipped, reside on the system in a protected form, be able to be decrypted and authenticated with strong cryptography every time they're loaded. Once they're loaded, the hardware has to be able to lock them down, protect them, make sure nobody else can get access to the data this code needs, make sure nobody else can get access to the critical control information, make sure nobody can get any access to modifying the code. If you don't have that, you're going to have malware. And I hope patch Tuesdays don't become eternal, but there's a possibility they can. And one of the points that Dan made is this is an economics problem. He's absolutely right. You may remember Dick Clark at one point, when he was still heading up cybersecurity, he went around the country having town hall meetings. And he asked for suggestions as to what one might do. And I offered the following suggestion. To me, it's an embarrassment, and we should be ashamed that companies like Microsoft are shipping hundreds of thousands of systems to people that are turning into bots and just being used to attack and so forth. We wouldn't let an automobile company get away with shipping a car where there are constant failures or accidents were happening, damage was being done. Yet we're permitting it now with software that's shipped around that's leading to massive financial damage in some cases, compromise of national security, and others and more harm than I'm probably even aware of. And so what I suggested in big part was the president should simply collect the CEOs of all of these companies together, explain to them how serious the problem was, and ask them to come in at least 3, perhaps 4 times a year and report on their progress on making their systems more secure. Dick said he liked the idea. He never took me up on it, unfortunately. But something has to happen, I think, to convince the industry that this is a national problem, it's a serious problem, and people have got to go back and make the investments, get those architectures right from the beginning so you can build them up. And no way do I want to diminish the importance of the problem of figuring out how to make the very best security policies and best handling, best procedures and practices for the systems that we now have, because there's thousands of them, millions of them spread around the world, and we're going to have to live with them, and finding out how to make best use of them is very important. But in my opinion, unless we go back to the drawing board and fix some of these things at the foundation, we're going to be continuing to patch over things that are built on a foundation of sand, and it's never going to happen. Now the second point, the second chain of trust that I want to talk about is what's going to happen, because DNSSEC now is a worldwide, highly reliable database where everything you get is cryptographically authenticated by strong digital signatures. If you look at what's going on today, after you get through the DNS system, the next kinds of problems that pop up are route hijacking. The structure of the internet is that there are organizations of routers called autonomous systems. And essentially, they talk a protocol called Border Gateway Protocol, where they talk to each other. The routers at their borders talk to each other and announce routes to get to certain places. The problem is BGP is totally insecure, and everybody believes what was done. So at one point, Pakistan wanted YouTube offline, so they made an announcement that they had a route, they had the best possible route to YouTube, but actually they routed it to a black hole, and as the net result was, as all these routers, ASs talked to each other, the YouTube one was down for about a day until they figured out what had happened. Route hijacking is serious. People who watch this, Dan Massey here at CSU watches this, and he has figures that show probably for some period of time, most days, there's significant rerouting going on. One of the things that's now being discussed in the public domain is to use DNSSEC, either through anchors in DNSSEC, be able to, when routes are announced, to validate them and see if indeed there is a trustworthy signed element contained in this database and prevent this routing. Secondly, if you look at commercial communications today, they practically all use a TLS or SSL type protocol, where at the beginning certificates are exchanged to public keys. And the question is, how do you know this certificate is trustworthy? People, see the little lock symbol come up in the browser and think, well, yeah, it's good, I can trust it. That's baloney. The lock symbol initially was supposed to be clicked, at which time the certificate would be displayed to you, and then the customer was supposed to make an intelligent decision. Was this really the certificate for the people you think you're talking to, and is it validated by a certificate authority that you really trust? Nobody knows this. I explained once to my daughter, who's now in her early 40s, about this, and she was surprised, but she called me a couple days later and said, yeah, she checked it, and she was shocked at what she found, because it wasn't where she was going. But that was the point. This presentation of certificates is totally busted. And there's an effort now called DANE, which means DNS-assisted authentication of named entities, where a new record type is going into DNS, so that when you receive a certificate, you can, by a formula for defining a new domain name, query the DNS system, and get back a record called the TLS association record, and that record will say, here's what you got to do to that certificate to check it out. And that can be, make sure some of the secure hashes of its contents match, or you can have the whole certificate match. So what's being done is into this DNS system, because it has established this worldwide chain of trust through its cryptographic chain of digital signatures. This now can be a reliable thing to allow the browser itself or the mailer itself to check and make sure that certificate really came from who you thought it should. But more generally, the whole idea of public key cryptography required that there be some place that you could, in a trustworthy manner, publish these certificates and make them available to everybody in the public. We've never had such a thing yet. And PKI systems get very complicated. The problem of revocation is serious. There are databases of revocation. Unfortunately, if you go to the Apple application store, it doesn't work for them if you're checking those databases of revoked certificates. They may have fixed this recently. I haven't run into the problem. But you have to actually change your settings on Mac if you want to do the most secure things. And again, the DNS system now is a perfect place to publish these things, and you could allow plugins to mailers and browsers to create your key, store them, make the public key available to anyone. Today a doctor, they get a lab report about a patient, and there's a serious condition. He wants to send an email to the patient immediately saying, get to the hospital and check yourself in because this is really serious. The doctor can't do it. If you send a normal email, he's violating the HIPAA rules, so he's breaking the law to inform the person that way. And sometimes this may be the only recourse he has. He can't reach the person on the phone. With this kind of thing, doctors can simply ask patients to establish certificates for themselves that are published in the DNS SEC system, and thus, when he wants to send something, he can grab the certificate and send an encrypted email, and it all works. So there's this chain of trust that's now been established for a worldwide database for the first time. Is a chain of trust that I think lots of things can leverage to improve the security of commercial transactions and communications in the future. And in the limited time we have to talk about this, because as the other gentleman have said, these discussions could go on for hours. But I just wanted to focus on these two things. There are basic chains of trust that we can establish for systems which, if architected from the ground up, can improve the security a lot. And secondly, that we have a real opportunity right now that the industry is responding to aggressively with what we can do because of the chain of trust that's been established by the DNS system. So thank you very much.